Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards. In this video, I want to discuss the risks of modern sports card investing. Alright guys, so in this video, I want to just talk about why buying and investing in sports cards actually has risk, even though people on Instagram, social media, wherever else will tell you there isn't a risk. I want to talk about what those risks are and why it's important to be aware of them while you're sports card investing and take these risks into consideration when buying certain players. This is something that I think is really important to take into consideration to look at. Right now, we just saw Acuna get injured. He tore his ACL, unfortunately, which really sucks because he is one of the players I really don't want to get hurt in baseball. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm rooting for people to get hurt. But seeing a player like Acuna, Tatis, Soto, Trout, Betts, all of those A-tier players, it really sucks. And especially someone as young and talented having a good year as Acuna. But because he is hurt, it poses a very interesting question for his sports cards. Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? He won't be playing this year again, and he probably will be playing halfway through next year as long as there's no setbacks in the recovery process, which I hope there won't be. He's young enough. Modern technology and medical information is much further advanced than it used to be. You know, Mickey Mantle played his entire career with a bum knee, torn ACL, whatever else. But the point is, I think Acuna will be fine, but as an investment, it's a little bit tougher because he may not exactly be fine anymore. People may not be putting their money into him or dumping him. Then you have Mike Trout. Mike Trout's aging, and as you age, your body falls down a little bit. Look at Ken Griffey Jr., one of the best ages 20 to 30 ever. Once he hit 30, his peak, he really went downhill from there with the Reds. And then you have Byron Buxton, a top prospect who is excellent, but then he just can't stay on the field. And a lot of it is freak injuries. A lot of it is just maybe his body's not holding up. We don't know. The last thing, he came back from injury and he was playing great in the first game he was back, and then he gets hit in the hand, breaks his hand, and he's out for a month. So things like that really suck, but they are a part of sports. They're not just baseball, they're in basketball, they're in football, wherever else, and they're really important to take into consideration. The last player on this list is Tony Conigliaro. Tony Conigliaro was a player for the Red Sox in the 1960s. He was a very good player, and he had a freak injury that ended his career. He was hit in the eye, and he came back and played, but he wasn't the same player. I want to show Tony Conigliaro versus Juan Soto and discuss how good he was and how freak injuries can really even derail players' careers, or people dying, unfortunately, can ruin players' careers for modern sports card investing. Here you have Tony Conigliaro versus Juan Soto. You know, at the same age, 22. They played 19 through 22. Juan Soto and all those stats, we talk about Juan Soto all time. Tony Conigliaro is always in those stats, and people don't know who he is. But if you look at his numbers, his rookie year was almost identical to Juan Soto. Almost the same amount of games. He had 24 home runs versus 22 home runs. 290 versus 292. 142 OPS plus versus 138 OPS plus. So imagine a Juan Soto type player getting hurt like that, where he gets hit in the eye, can't really see well, isn't the same guy. But we can even see his last year. They were both all-stars. They're the fourth year, age 22. He got hit in the 95th game of the season, or the 95th game he played in the season. Soto is in his 79th game, and 287 versus 283, 143 OPS versus 142 OPS plus. The similarities are crazy. So my point is, just be aware, like, there is a ton of injury risk, and injury risk is something that nobody enjoys and nobody collects, and we all hate to see it, even if you don't love the player. You know, there's certain players I don't like, but if I saw they got hit in the eyeball and are out for the rest of their life, that sucks. Nobody wants to see that. So take this into consideration when buying. If you can't handle that risk, then maybe vintage is better for you, because a player, after they're done playing, they can't keep playing. They're done. So I just wanted to point out this kind of crazy comparison and just show that it can happen. Next up, I want to talk about Grady Sizemore. Grady Sizemore was one of the very best players in Major League Baseball, probably a top 10 player from ages 21 to 25 from 2004 to 2008. A little bit different type player. You know, there were players like Pujols, and Bonds was still active, I think, in 2004. So Grady Sizemore is a little bit different type of player, but still an excellent player. You can see his player comps: Duke Snider, Mookie Betts, Barry Bonds, for that part of his career. And then from ages 21 to 25, he accumulated 25.7 WAR. Shows he's already on a really good path to the Hall of Fame, or you would think so, because in order for a player to get there, they have to have a really good, dominant early 20s. That's something that's really important for a lot of position players. Pitchers, they usually can peak in the late 20s and they're fine. So you might be wondering what happened to Grady Sizemore. His numbers are great. You probably know his name because he was a household name in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. At age 27, he turned in from Barry Bonds to Reggie Smith. This isn't the Barry Bonds that hit like the bajillion home runs. Actually, you know, in the 2000s, hitting 30 home runs was really good. But the point is, Reggie Smith is fine, but then he went to Dave Henderson. He didn't even play his age 29 season, and then Michael Kadire. He just fell off of the face of the earth a little bit. So let's go look at what happened. He just got hit by injuries, and after that, he just wasn't the same player. That is a risk you have to assume is players from year to year aren't going to be the same. Look at Cody Bellinger. Fantastic rookie year, okay second year. MVP the third year, not a good fourth year. This year he's having a really bad year because of injuries as well. But the point is a lot of really talented players are hurt by nagging injuries that really impact their values. So just be aware of career arcs like Grady Sizemore, where they just might fall off the face of the earth. That is a very real thing. Players' bodies deteriorate in their early 30s. It can happen. Off-the-field decisions are also something that really impacts sports card investing. Look at Marcelo Zuna. He was just caught beating his girlfriend or wife by the police, which is tough because I think they're going to charge him with some pretty serious penalties. I know that Jeff Passan talked about how it's going to require jail time. I don't know if that's true. He might have great lawyers that might get him off. Who knows what's going to happen? But regardless, he probably won't be welcomed back onto the Major League Baseball field by any team for a long time. Aroldis Chapman did the same thing, and he was back on the field, so who knows? He didn't beat anybody, but he had some domestic abuse issues. And then you have Josh Hamilton. Josh Hamilton had really bad substance abuse. Really sad story of Josh Hamilton. Fantastic player. One of the highest ceilings for any baseball player that ever existed. But the bad thing is he just had substance abuse plus other bad decision-making processes. Then you have Trevor Bauer. I'm not saying Bauer is guilty. I don't know what's going to happen. You're innocent until proven guilty, but it's not looking too good for him right now. I hope that everything's going to work out, but at the same time, you got to take those things serious, and that's not something I really want to dive into. But the point is, people who are buying his cards, this card was purchased for, I think, $260 recently, and now it's probably not worth a third of that, especially if those allegations are true, which is a really tough thing for investors. But again, some things are more important than sports. But regardless, when we look at this as an alternative investment, we're putting our money, it can be tough, and that's something you need to consider when buying sports cards. After that is prospecting. I talked about prospecting, the risks, inherited risk of prospecting before, but prospects for long-term investments aren't good. You can make a lot of money on prospecting because of the fact when they debut, you can cash in. A lot of times people will just pay for hype, or if they have a couple of good games, people will pay for that hype. You know, I very rarely buy prospects. I really like Wander Franco, and I've bought a few of his cards. He's played poorly in the big leagues so far, but I think that's okay. He's only 20 years old. I've heard that the difference between AAA and the big leagues is a bigger gap now than ever before, and I believe it, because the talent difference between AAA and the big leagues is just getting more wide. But the point is, he'll be fine. But regardless, let's just talk about minor leaguers, shall we? So before 2021, when there was a bunch more teams, there were a couple teams that were cut out, like, you know, the Pioneer League. I'm from Idaho Falls Chucker fans, I'm from Idaho Falls, they're gone. But before 2021, there were 240 minor leaguers per team, so 7,200 in all of baseball. You know, 10% of minor leaguers will make it to Major League Baseball. Only 1.5% of all MLB players will make the Hall of Fame. And there are about 11. That means there's about 11 players in the minors right now that will make the Hall of Fame. So investing in these prospects is something that's not always a good move. We can even look at players like Joe Mauer and David Wright, who had excellent careers. Joe Mauer's probably going to make the Hall of Fame. David Wright probably won't make the Hall of Fame unless it's by the Veterans Committee in the future. But the point is, their Bowman Chrome autographs are worth less than Wander Franco's. Wander Franco's BGS 9510 goes for about $2,000, or at least it was, probably $1,500 now after a slow start. Well, you can get a Joe Mauer for probably only $500, if that. And Joe Mauer's Bowman Chrome autograph is going to have a way smaller pop because it was a hard-to-grade card from the early 2000s. I think it was 2002? Could be wrong, but right around that era. So the point remains that it's just risky buying prospects because, you know, their ceiling is really high. As you can see, look at Mike Trout, but the floor is very low, and people don't talk about that floor. I just want to talk about the positives of modern sports card investing at people like Shohei Ohtani. This card was purchased for $36. I have it intentionally right here. I left it on here so you could see it. And on September 6th. You can later see, like, before that, the low price in the last year was $20. Someone paid $20, and they had a 2,000% increase, 2,112% exactly, for a current market value of $1,715 because he's playing so well and he's a sensation. So there is very high reward for some high-risk investments. This actually was a low-risk investment. But for modern investments, there still is a high reward. Then you can look at Mike Trout. I talked about like prospecting being risky, but there are examples of people like Mike Trout, Mookie Betts, even others, that it pays off well for. Right here, this card was purchased for $100 about 10 years ago, and now it goes for about $39,000. That is a 32,000% increase of value. So it really can pay off for you, but because modern is risky, it's up to you to take on what risk you believe in. I love modern. I prefer modern over vintage just because I like to see my investments play live in the moment. And some people don't like that, but I do. Even though Mookie Betts is down, it's still fun to watch every at bat and really root for him. But for some people, that's something they can't handle. So just be aware they're taking on certain amounts of risk, and you need to understand what it is. So a lot of people just shout all their successes. I just want to talk about the downside risk of some of these investments and discuss them with you. There's a lot of stuff I didn't include, but these are some of the biggest that I see. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.